Formula One's new 2026 cars are tipped to unleash some big overtaking surprises, with passing having become more difficult in F1 and far too reliant on DRS. New engines, cars and aero demands look set to totally disrupt the spectacle as we know it. That's because drivers are going to be able to follow each other much closer, as efforts have been made to tidy up the car wake that's disrupting the racing right now. DRS is also being put in the bin. Instead, the battle for track position will revolve around energy management. There are going to be push-to-pass overtaking boosts from override mode. Plus, there's the impact of active aero, which tech chiefs are waking up to becoming a really important factor. As teams advance their designs, senior figures in the paddock have dropped us some early clues that the F1 spectacle could be totally different next year. Aston Martin team boss Andy Cowell has teased that there will be surprises on this front. So we've done some digging to find out a bit more about what he's talking about, and the evidence points to more overtaking happening and it occurring in places that would be unheard of right now. This comes with a word of warning though, that it may not be the good news you all think, but more on that later. So let's dig into the details, because there are a host of ways that the racing is going to look totally different in 2026. As teams have begun working on their simulations to try to get a better understanding of how the racing will shake out, some fascinating scenarios have opened up that could change the spectacle completely and deliver passes in places that do not normally happen now. What teams have found is that with a lot of tracks not offering the potential for battery power to be deployed on every straight, drivers are going to have to be smart about where they deploy energy and even use a new override mode, which is effectively an overtaking boost button that gives a driver some extra available power. Williams boss James Vowles has suggested that at current tracks where there are just one or two obvious overtaking opportunities, like Spa-Francorchamps, the door could be open for drivers to use extra energy to dive past rivals in places that are not possible now. Right now, with the current rules and the location of DRS zones, the most typical place to pull a pass on another car at Spa is on the run up the Camel Straight from Raidillon to Les Combes. However, the potential speed differentials on offer with override mode could open up chances on several other straights now, such as the run down to Pouhon or even through Blanchimont into the chicane. This could be especially true if drivers ahead are tricked into burning too much energy in the wrong place around the lap. But even those drivers attacking from behind and wanting to make progress are going to have to be smart about where they pull off their moves. It will be no use in burning up all your battery power and override mode capability down the start-finish straight at Monza to pass a rival, for example, if you're then going to find yourself a sitting duck coming out of the first chicane. Drivers may also find themselves having to be clever when it comes to picking the places where they want to harvest energy and where they want to deploy it. It may no longer be a case of every straight being about going for maximum power. One scenario that's been suggested is that in the short blast between the first and second Lesmos, drivers may find they're better off backing off there to harvest some energy rather than going flat out. This will then give them more energy for deployment for the run down to the Oscara chicane, where they can then carry their speed for longer. Drivers may have to accept getting swamped by other cars if they are harvesting energy while others choose to deploy it, but the flip side should be they're able to retake positions later on. At some locations, however, drivers may find themselves in no choice but to burn through their energy because there may not be a chance later in the lap to retake the place. One such area this could happen could be the Monaco tunnel, where if you lose a position because you're not saving battery power, then you may find yourself stuck behind your rival for the rest of the lap. The new energy deployment rules are already enough to change the nature of overtaking F1 next year, but there's another extra element that could shake things up even more. It is that there's going to be a big variation across the grid in terms of how much energy each car is going to have available, and this will be a consequence both of different power unit designs, but also each team's aerodynamic approach. When F1's 26 cars hit the track for the first time, there was likely going to be quite a bit of variation between the different engine manufacturers. Those that have nailed the rules may deliver their drivers not only a more powerful engine, but also one that perhaps recovers its energy quicker and better than others. This could allow them to have extra battery power on tap around the lap, which would be critical in both boosting lap time and also overtaking any rivals who find themselves out of energy as they've already burned all theirs up. But there's an extra element that's emerged too as teams have begun working on their 26 designs, and this is the choice of wing levels. Because where teams choose to pitch their downforce and drag levels could well have a huge impact in terms of overtaking too. F1's decision to go down a movable aerodynamic route was because it needed to reduce drag as much as possible down the straights in a bid to help the cars not burn up their battery power so fast. But it's wrong to think that the movable aero will work in a way that sheds drag completely, because it's not as if the wings are going to be completely flat. Instead, the movable flaps are going to operate in a similar way to how current DRS works, where the upper flaps flip up and sheds approximately 2/3 of the drag and downforce. With the front and rear wings changing from straight line mode to corner mode throughout the lap, teams are going to face a call on where they want to pitch their downforce and drag levels. And this choice is far from straightforward and could vary up and down the grid. The ideal scenario is for the wings to deliver maximum downforce in the corners while switching to minimum drag on the straights. But the reality is that teams are going to have to choose a compromise between those two, because it's not possible to have the best of both worlds. The headache will be that a car that has its wings pitched more towards downforce for better cornering will have more drag even when its straight line mode is activated. It will therefore be slower down the straights and need to use more battery power to punch a hole through the air. But on the flip side, a car that has its wing pitched for minimum drag down the straights will probably find itself exposed by suffering in the corners, as the downforce levels will not be as high. Get your wing levels wrong in either direction and you could find yourself exposed to being passed easily on the straights, or find rivals muscling their way past you into or through the corners. There is also a scenario that if teams choose very different approaches, one goes for higher downforce and the other for less drag, then they could be swapping places several times per lap as their strengths and weaknesses play out. One car could be quicker through Monza's Parabolica, for example, because they have more downforce so they can sweep around a rival. But with greater drag and through burning up more energy on the following straight, they could find themselves passed quite quickly. It's no wonder that Alpine Technical Director David Sanchez has admitted that matching the right wing levels to energy deployment for the best performance was a complex matter to get on top of.
Teenage rookie Kimi Antonelli's rapid rise to a Mercedes F1 race seat is a dream become reality. That's something the whole world is experiencing right now with AI. Here's more on that from Kimi and Mercedes F1 partner G42, who this video is brought to you by.
I'm Kimi, and I like to dream. But I like dreams even more when they become real. Maybe you didn't see me coming, but I didn't come alone. My generation is a new ally. AI used to be a dream, but not anymore. It's become real fast, just like us. Now, we can change stuff quicker, solve problems faster, make things happen sooner, and make life better. It used to be the stuff of dreams, but we're not dreaming anymore.
There is not one element that stands out as being critical for opening the door for a different approach to overtaking. It's more about how a combination of elements have come together, and some of this even remains a moving target. For example, the locations and durations of the activation zones, where override mode can be deployed and active aero mode switch, will be decided on a race-by-race basis by the FIA. Furthermore, the necessary gaps between cars at the detection zones that will enable override mode to be activated will vary at each track too. How aggressive or conservative these are could make all the difference in determining how powerful override mode is. Get it right, and there could be a decent power offset between two drivers battling, especially as there are separate regulations that dictate a ramp down rate for each car on the straights. So if a pursuing driver times the activation of their override mode perfectly, they could well enjoy a couple of seconds more power than their rival, whose power is declining, allowing them to easily blast past. Based on what we know so far, F1 could turn into a game of cat and mouse when it comes to overtaking next year. On paper that sounds great, as after years of being starved of much overtaking, there could be no shortage of action in 2026. But if things do get a bit crazy next year, and cars are overtaking each other several times per lap, then that risks opening the door for something that proves too chaotic to follow. If there is too much swapping of places, then overtakes could become meaningless, and that is as big a turn-off as when passing is a rarity. This was one of the complaints in the early DRS days, when F1 sometimes made it too easy for following cars to get past. What will be key is for the FIA to ensure that it positions the detection and activation zones in the right place for each track to ensure that things do not get too crazy. The likelihood is that the start of 2026 will be a huge learning exercise for everybody though, and that means there's plenty of scope for those surprises that Cal has talked about.